sorted out those issues. So welcome again to the Environmental Services Committee, and I'd especially like to welcome our community board members and Chair Jan Finlayson from the Geraldine Community Board. I'd like to call for apologies. I already have apologies from Ali Talbot and Raywin Hessel. Are there any other apologies? If not, would somebody like to move that the apologies are accepted? Thank you, Mayor Bowen, and thank you, Councillor Parker, for seconding. Are there any, carried. Oh, all in favour? Aye, thank you, carried. Are there any items of urgent business? No. Any items of a minor nature to raise? No. Thank you. Any declarations or conflicts of interest for what's on the agenda? No. Thank you. So we'll just move on to the Chairperson's report. Since the last meeting on the 15th of November and outside of my normal council meetings, I've met with Andrew Oliver, who is the OTOP facilitator, to discuss what happens at OTOP for the year. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the first meeting due to a funeral, but I'm looking forward to being part of that. I attended a Federated Farmers meeting regarding the district plan with Mayor Nigel and Mr Cooper. There's a little bit of angst in the rural community around the district plan, but I thought it was a pretty productive meeting and good to have that conversation with them. Attended a climate change strategy advisory group meeting, and we had an update on the work that group is doing from Reece and Dr Phil Driver last time. And also myself and the Deputy Chair, Councillor Jackson, met with Mr Cooper just to talk about what's coming up for the committee for the year. So that was all. Are there any questions on any of that? If not, I'll move the adoption of my report. If I could have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Burt. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. We'll just move on to the confirmation of minutes. There is one correction that needs to be made with the attendance to correct Rosie Oliver's name. Were there any other corrections or amendments that are required to be made? If not, I will move that the minutes of the Environmental Services Committee meeting held on the 15th of November 2022 be confirmed as a true and correct record of that meeting, and that the chairperson's electronic signature be attached with that minor amendment. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Mayor Nigel, all in favour? Carried. So we'll move on to our first report for the day, which is just a moment, sorry. So we have a report on the in-house carbon management with Reece Taylor and Andrew Dixon. Welcome. Gentlemen, have you got anything to introduce this, or are you?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think Andrew Dixon might be best placed to introduce the topic.
Okay, cool. So just the purpose of the report is to update the committee members with the proposed scope of the initial work and some suggested extensions. I'll hand over to you both. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. So with me is Reece Taylor, who is leading our climate change work at Timaru. So this report here is about the measurement of in-house carbon usage. It's going to be a mandatory reporting requirement coming up in the next year, and so it's just some of the work that Reece is doing to inform you of that work. So I'll pass it over to Reece to just explain a bit more.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillors, the long-term plan committed the council to doing several things related to climate issues. One we picked up on in our November meeting, and we'll come back to later in the year, probably April, with some really interesting progress on the work on strategy. That's not the topic for today, though. The in-house focus initially was to try to get our own house in order, to use the well-worn phrase. Until you actually know what the carbon emission consequences are of day-to-day business of the council, it's very hard to know what you can work on to try to reduce any of those emissions, and in the process maybe even save some dollars as well. So the idea behind this, which is encouraged by the Mayoral Forum and is encouraged indeed by the Ministry of the Environment, is that we systematically record the carbon emissions generated by our work, starting with the things which are very obvious ones, such as the fuel use in our vehicle fleets and the electricity use in our buildings, and then moving to the more difficult and complex aspects, as we work through the process. So what Andrew and I have suggested here is that we tackle this in two bites, and for the current financial year, which is a year of voluntary reporting, we gather the information that we can easily get hold of, and in the second year, which is when we move into mandatory reporting, we tackle the more difficult and complex aspects. And by difficult and complex, I mean, for example, talking with the council-controlled organisations, which we work alongside, because we need to bring them in with us. But I think it's very hard to persuade our colleagues in Venture Timaru or other such bodies to do this counting of carbon until we're doing it in-house here at the council offices and in our council activities and services. So the report is for your information. Very happy to take questions on it if required, but I know you've got a very full agenda and I didn't want to take a lot of your time.
Thank you, Mr Taylor. Any questions, Councillor Puddington?
Yeah, Bruce, I'm just interested, approximate fuel use by staff commuting to work. Are we going to tell staff where they can live and what they can do and how they can get to work?
Certainly.
I would have thought consultants flying in and driving would have been much more concern than how our staff get to work.
I do agree with you, Councillor. It's one of the areas which is included in the information that it's very useful to gather, but it's not a mandatory reporting item. Also, if you're trying to engage the whole team working for the council in the issue of responding to climate change, one way of doing that is to make them aware of the carbon implications of how they travel. It's not to give them any advice necessarily on where they have to live or the means of their travel, but it may prompt practical actions. And two examples of those would be, on occasion, it may be efficient and effective for them to work from home and not travel. Another example would be to share their travel in, so they're coming in with another colleague. I'm already doing this myself. You're going to expect me to try and walk the talk if I can. So those practical actions might be prompted by an understanding of the carbon impact of their work. So we see this, the two of us, as an educational opportunity for us, an engagement opportunity within our staff team, rather than an attempt to direct where they're located. But thank you for asking.
Yeah, we also look at the modes of transport as well. You know, they can cycle, and we're doing a lot of work in the active transport area, but there's also the My Way bus service as well.
Thank you. Councillor Shannon, did you have a question?
It was actually the same question Councillor Puddington asked, only with regards to the fuel use by staff, when, as point 7 says, that reporting needs to be clear, consistent and credible. Obviously, accuracy would be a concern for me when reporting staff's actual fuel usage, whereas it's easy in-house for council vehicles. So how do you plan on actually gathering that data? Yeah, from staff.
From staff, it would be...
Mr Taylor, sorry, could I just add a little bit to that so you can ask both questions at the same time, because I had a very similar question about materiality and what is your level of materiality when you're collecting that data, because you think about taxis, are they diesel, are they electric, are they fuel? So if you wouldn't mind just including that in your answer, that would be great, thank you.
The reference you'll see in the paper under item 8 is approximate fuel use by staff. Our interest is to get an idea of order of magnitude, and it would be voluntary information provision to us, which gives us an idea of order of magnitude. You know, the average staff participant travels this distance, emits this amount of carbon per week. It's something along those lines that's going to be adequate for our purpose. In terms of official travel on council business, our travel agency, Orbit, already do carbon calculations and will be sharing that information with us. So that saves us having to double up. They're already recording the carbon impact of the flights, for example, where council staff or councillors have needed to travel. And so we have an indication of that. So if it already exists on someone's record system, we'll try to capture it. We're aiming to do this in a quick and efficient way, and to have technical advice that we do it in a way that other councils have already tried. So we're going to follow their experience rather than reinvent it.
Any other questions? Councillor Booth?
Oh, goodness. Can it be sheeted back to any monetary benefits in regards to your suggestions here, such as our liability for purchasing carbon credits?
There are two separate decisions here, Councillor Booth. The possibility of reducing operating costs may come from identifying if we have, for example, an over-provision of a vehicle fleet, or we have inefficient vehicles which could be less carbon emitting within the fleet. So that's an opportunity there for reducing operating costs. In terms of carbon credits, it's a separate decision for the Council to consider whether we purchase large amounts of carbon credits at an often increasing price to offset our emissions. The focus I've been asked to have is on understanding our emissions and looking at ideas for reduction of emissions, which is good for the planet. The question of whether or not we attempt to offset and, for example, declare ourselves as being carbon neutral is a separate decision and not one we're ready for yet.
I guess it would be helpful if there was a monetary outcome for the council in regards to the work that you're doing, that we could reduce the purchase of the carbon, so therefore the stuff going into the landfill, etc., and obviously the benefit of the methane, which you've mentioned.
Yes, Madam Chair, I think it's very important that we look at the cost and the benefit of doing work on carbon reduction, and certainly we could indicate the cost we would incur if we had to buy carbon offset.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mayor Nigel. So the recommendation is that the Environmental Services Committee receives and notes the in-house carbon emission inventory progress report, and that a further update on progress be presented to the 25th of July 2023 Environmental Services Committee meeting. So that was moved by Mayor Nigel. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Booth. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, our next item on the agenda is a report on the RMA reform submission, and we have Bronwyn Larkins, Brendan Madley and Hamish Burrell to present this to us. Somebody else. Oh, that's right. And Mark Lowe, thank you. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval and input from the Committee for the Council submission to the Natural and Built Environment Bill and Spatial Planning Bill due on the 5th of February 2023.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to introduce it a little more, this is a submission that's been sought by central government, and it was put out for consultation prior to Christmas, the turnaround being the 5th of February. So it's put us under a little bit of pressure in terms of pulling this together. You will notice that there's a slight conflict in what's recommended in the report and what's currently in the draft submission, and that being around whether or not we would like to be a trial region at Canterbury for having adopting or moving towards the regional planning framework sooner rather than later. I'll hand over to the team and they can guide us through that and fill in the detail, but thanks very much. When you're ready, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. So we'll just give a quick overview of the submission as it stands, and just reiterating that it is obviously a draft submission. There's a bit of refinement still to do on it following this meeting. The submission's closed for both bills at the end of this week. And I guess the submission itself is, a fairly high level. Obviously, we haven't delved into all the technical detail, but there will be other submissions such as the LGNZ, Taitoara and Canterbury Mayoral Forum submissions that will delve into some of that information and that will support. So I'll pass over to Bronwyn just to cover some of the key points that have been made in the submission, and then we can welcome your feedback and any questions you might have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, councillors. As you're aware, the Resource Management Act has become quite a difficult piece of legislation for users to navigate. Therefore, we recommend and we are grateful that there are new bills for this framework. The purpose of the Natural Built Environment Bill will be the bill that we'll be submitting on. It contains the majority of the framework, and therefore that is where we've have our focus The NBE creates a positive aspect to outcomes, promoting the use, development and protection of the environment that focuses on the future wellbeing benefits to the environment, managing adverse effects and recognising and upholding Te Oranga o Te Atee, which is the health of the natural environment and the intrinsic relationship between iwi and hapu, and the interconnectedness of all parts of the natural environment, and the essential relationship between the health of the natural environment and its capacity to sustain life. The NBE plans will categorise activities more consistently and play a key role in identifying who may participate in consenting. The bill will support communities to better prepare for the adaptation of climate change and the risk from natural hazards. The bill also provides new tools for compliance and enforcement. The NBE will create a regional planning committee who will determine themselves their size and the population based on weighting. The NBE recognises that states that the local iwi and hapu will also be part of this committee, providing decision-making progress. We do hold a number of concerns that have been raised in the draft submission, and I'll provide you just key lines for 7 of them. That is the tension in the Natural Built Environments Bill between its purpose, system outcomes and decision-making process. The fact that the Canterbury region is complex and diverse, more so than any other region. We held concerns for the size and the makeup of the Regional Planning Committee, the loss of local government viability, particularly at this time when there are a number of major government reforms occurring within other activities. The loss of local control and planning decisions within local jurisdictions, concerns about the reforms and the disproportionate burden that is placed on local government versus that of central government. Current local government changes, in particular the 3 water suites of bills. The draft submission contains suggestions for further options for central government to consider, as well as the major consideration for clarity of definitions to limit ambiguity. These reforms require a long-term investment of time and resources, and Timaru District Council should request cross-party support and commitment for these reforms. Welcome to any questions that you may have, councillors.
I might, if it's okay, Madam Chair, I might just get Hamish, do you have any comments that you want to make just on the bill as the expert?
Thank you, Mark. Look, I think the summary that's been provided by Bronwyn is more than satisfactory. The only bits that I would add is just to reiterate the fundamental change to a combined plan for the region and the process that will have to take place from here. It is possible, depending upon transitional arrangements, that we might be blessed with having not just 2 but 3 plans in operation at the same time, depending upon how this all works out. And the only other thing that I would add is that this week MFE are going to provide a letter to councils on this year's upcoming sort of milestones along the way in the process, not just for this legislation, but for also some of the important national direction which is still to come out. So watch this space in the next couple of days, should be interesting.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that you've done on this. I think you've done a really good job of taking what is a complex issue and refining it to a few key points for councillors to consider, so I appreciate the work that has been done there. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Burt?
Yeah, I'm happy to move the resolution in terms of accepting that report, and I just want to again reiterate for everyone that there is no accident in the fact that local government reform, 3 Waters and RMA are aligned, and we can never look at them in isolation from one another. There's a tenet through them that is very, very specific in it. And you've highlighted in number 10 there in terms of the intention to rationalise that plan to make it potentially erode local democracy and the ability for council to take decisions that are in the best interest of Timaru District. And that's what we've all got to face, and we need to make sure that we're always alive to the fact that there is a very specific agenda in relation to that. So happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Before I seek a seconder, are there any further questions? Mayor Nigel?
I do.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah, look, happy to second it if it wasn't done, but also just want to emphasise that, make the point that we aren't involved in the trial, so that's not a part of it, because I would hate for us to go down that track. I think we're going to get better value out of the investment that we put into our plan by not being involved. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Scott?
Just a couple of questions. Do we get to speak to the submission? Or is it just a written submission? Is there the opportunity to speak?
It's a select committee process, so there is the opportunity to speak. I'm not sure on this one whether they will be restricting the number of groups that do speak, but we can certainly, if that's the wish of the committee, we can add that to it.
Yeah, okay. And I just, RPC is obviously Regional Planning Committee, but I couldn't find the abbreviation for RCP.
I do apologise, councillor, that was a typo
Oh, that's
error on
right,
my
okay.
behalf, and I hold that.
Oh no, that's right. I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I
No,
can't
that's
do
all right.
Control F, so I couldn't find that.
I do apologise,
No,
councillor.
that's fine. No, that's all good. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a few little bit of refinement that we'll do following this meeting just to tidy it up.
Are there any other questions before I have a few myself? But are there any other questions? Want to take questions from the floor? Or not? Okay, thank you. Yeah, Jan, do you have a question?
Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, hang on. Sorry, Jan, you may have to come up and ask your question at the microphone so it can be heard.
Thanks for that. Yeah, well, it's more an observation. I do have a lot of experience working with the conservation legislation, which has a similar Section 4, which is, you know, it's equivalent to what you've got here as Clause 4. It's actually turned up a lot of confusion and a lot of wastage of resources and time because it's not clear, and there are a lot of very subjective concepts that are given life to through it, particularly in this bit of proposed ledge. And I would say, just to encapsulate that or give an example, there hasn't been a conservation planning tool approved for, I think, 4 years, and in large part because of the confusion caused by the equivalent Section 4. So it's just something to really think about, and I think it maybe a lot of groups are nervous of addressing it, but it needs to be addressed. Yeah, I know actually at the Environmental Defence Society's conference a couple of years ago, Tony Randerson was present, and he emphasised that this needs a lot more thinking about and specificity. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jan. That probably leads on to one of my points, and I've just got to remember which one it is, sorry. Point 26. And my view is, because now we've ended up with two competing tensions, as you point out, between environment and development, whereas we used to have to take into account the well-being, the socio-economic and well-being of the community, and I think we need to advocate hard to keep that in there, because it is, in my view, I'm not sure what the rest of council think, but in my view that's a really important consideration in any decision. I also, at point 44, it talks about urban development, whereas it's silent on rural development, and I actually think we should just talk about development, would be my view, because this has the potential to stymie rural development as well, not just urban development. Point 35, I wasn't convinced that that was a valid argument. That talks about what happens when somebody leaves the committee and you get a new member on, but that's going to happen at any time when you have a change to the committee, so I just wasn't convinced it was a valid argument, but so I would suggest that it's taken out unless somebody has an allergic reaction to that. And then I just wondered if you could just discuss point 19 for me, please, because I got a bit confused. So that's about where you're asking to consider different populations. So did you mean different ethnic groups, special groups, community groups, or did you mean size of population? Because I think we'd end up with two very different outcomes. If you wouldn't mind just explaining that, if you may, sorry.
Meant size of the population. So Timaru district in itself has the population's more widespread than that of, say, Christchurch. So it's about the urban population sprawl.
Okay, because I thought from what I read, and forgive me if I've misunderstood this, but we were trying to advocate, because I thought we'd end up with not a very good representation because we have a small population size, and I felt like that was kind of an oxymoron, because then we're saying do it on population size and that won't benefit us, but have I misunderstood that?
I think, Madam Chair, we took on the point that was received through Mr Cooper from you about the population weighting is normal way of voting. We've got very small councils here within the Canterbury region, and we didn't, if potentially all 11 of them could sit on the Regional Planning Committee, which would make the committee quite large. We wanted to ensure that some larger councils, say for example Christchurch, didn't say, oh, well, Waimate can't have one because they've only got a small number of constituents that they look after. So I need to redraft that clearer for you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Then I just kind of had a general comment, and for example, point 3, and I should probably just ask council if this is their opinion. So just having read submissions from various groups on different things, I have a little bit of a thing for when something that is an opinion is presented as if it's a fact, and to me point 3 is an opinion, but it comes across as if it's a fact, and I just actually want to make sure that that is council's opinion, because this will be endorsed by council, that it has become frustratingly clunky. I don't think anyone would disagree with that, but and there's a couple of other places in there where there's something that is actually an opinion, but it doesn't have the we think council believes, you know, that actually points out that it's just an opinion rather than a fact.
With clause 3 there, Madam Chair, that has already been redrafted and reworded.
Okay, thank you.
So I do thank you, though.
Okay. Thank
You're on the same, I have the same opinion of Mr Cooper.
And then just one very last thing is under point 2, it says it's been endorsed by the chair of the committee, and I think it would have more weighting if council are comfortable that we put in there that it's supported by council, and even if it is unanimously supported, that we include the word unanimously, so that it just carries a wee bit more weight than just me endorsing it, that it's fully supported by council.
Happy to make that change.
Does anyone have any objections to any of that? Okay, so if not, are there any further questions? Okay, so if not, we have Councillor Burt has already moved the recommendation that the Environmental Services Committee receive and consider the draft Natural and Built Environment Bill and Spatial Planning Bill submission and endorse the draft submission as attached. That was seconded by Mayor Nigel. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. I think that, thank you very much everyone, that was really good. There are no matters of urgent or minor business, so I will close the meeting at 10:29. Thank you.
I will start with welcoming Jan for the Jordan Community Board. Welcome, Jan. And I've got apologies from Ali Talbot and Raywin Hessel, which I will move if I have a seconder. Councillor Scott, thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. Identifications of urgent business. Identifications, matters of a minor nature. Yes, Mayor Bowen.
Just that a member of the public, being Ryan Dejoux, presents to us on residential development potential for subdivision.
Thank you. Do I need to move that? No, I just accept that. I accept that as minor nature, and we've spoken with Mr. Dejoux and he's happy to come in after the reports, so thank you. Any conflicts of interest to be noted? Thank you. Chairman's report. Since our last standing committees, I've attended a citizenship ceremony, council meeting, tenders and procurement, people and performance. I attended a meeting with the Paraora community group, and I've met with group manager Andrew Dixon. I'll move my report if I have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Pye. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Lovely. We move on to confirmations 6.1 of the minutes on page 6 from 15th of November 22. I'm happy to move. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Scott. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Start off with our reports. 7.1 on page 12. I'd like to welcome Brendan Markup. Is that correct? So, report 7.1, endorsement of the Timaru City Town Dogs in the City trial. So this is looking at a temporary, time-bound and a well-communicated trial, and it's to look and better understand the impact this may have, increasing vibrancy or not. And just want to point out to the committee, as per page 23, this trial emerged as an idea from the CBD group business owners, as well as the city town workshops and stakeholders meetings. So there has been some thought and backing behind this concept before we've come to this point where we are now. So I'll open the floor and welcome Paul Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just, my involvement was in relation to the enforcement of the bylaw or not, so that only forms part of the picture. So I'll hand over to Brendan, who's got the full detail of the report and can speak to it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, Council, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this matter. So, as has been outlined, the City Town project team is seeking to run a Dogs in the City trial, and like a number of the trials that has been proposed, there is a clash between the proposed trial and existing council regulations or bylaws. I think that is probably part of the point, to try and test different things as part of the City Town trials, to see what works, what enhances the vibrancy, what might not. I'll also just note, forgot to say this before, hopefully Ryan Reynolds is joining us online. I see he's joining at the moment, and so he's here just in a supporting role as a subject matter expert to answer any questions that we may not be able to. Hopefully something's okay with the audio. I'm not sure what's going on there. Okay, I'll just forge on, we'll see what happens. Okay, so as I was saying, the key matter here is to try and get some direction from the committee in terms of endorsing the trial or not, and if so, how to do that in such a way, given that there is that clash with the existing bylaw. I'll briefly outline the matter and some of the options, but then again, just being conscious of time, we'll take the report as read and happy to take any questions or hand over to Mark, Ryan or Paul. So one key reason, as I understand it, why this trial is desired is because, as was outlined, CBD Group and other stakeholders have indicated that they've seen a willingness for dogs to be allowed more generally and more permissively in the central city. We do know anecdotally that dogs can be a key priority for people when they're deciding where they might live, and then also just in general when considering livability. At the moment, the existing bylaw allows dogs to be in the central city under a very limited set of circumstances, and those are outlined in the report. For example, if they're travelling directly to a vet surgery or a food business, because the Food Act was amended in 2014 to allow eateries to permit dogs, etc. But there currently is no ability legally for dogs to and their owners to generally be in the central city area and generally sort of going around. So what the options basically are if we move forward with the trial is for council to either not enforce this bylaw for the period of time of the trial, which is a valid option and which Paul can speak to, or the other option would be to go through the process of amending the bylaw to facilitate the trial, which is a longer term process requiring public consultation. Our preferred option, our recommendation, is to not enforce the bylaw. Firstly, because again, that's a valid option, and because we feel that there are significant monitoring, mitigation, and communication methods that can be undertaken to enable that to work successfully. And secondly, given the time frames involved, given that the City Town trials are occurring within a particular time period, working towards the long-term plan 2024-34, we feel that the option of not enforcing the bylaw is preferred. Other than that, I think that's probably a sufficient overview, and I've taken up sufficient of your time based on the fact that there's quite a lot outlined in the report. So very happy to hand over to Paul and or Mark or Ryan, or just take questions in general.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll just point out that we already have discretion in how we apply the enforcement of our bylaws in many cases. We have an enforcement policy that promotes a graduated response model, starting from a gentle conversation to full prosecution. So we already have that discretion built in. I'm not aware in the last 5 years, and you probably go back further, of any case where anybody's had anything other than a gentle conversation for taking a dog into the CBD for a reason that isn't outlined as one of the exemptions. So for the purposes of this trial, and based on expert advice that we've taken through this process, I, as GM, have a degree of comfort that we can use that discretion for the purposes of this trial and continue on that basis. But it's a matter for this committee to decide whether or not they have that level of comfort. But I'm happy to answer any questions on that particular aspect of this project or experiment, if you like.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. I'll go to the floor. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, I'm happy to endorse the option one. It lines up, the trial lines up nicely with the access of dogs to the beach area, and it lines up with that inner city philosophy of live and work within that area, and you can't have the two without having that ability to have dogs allowable. It's already not lined up, and there's tension between that and the Food Act that allows people to take them to eateries and all that sort of thing. So it lines up perfectly, and if you can, for the practical option of not enforcing, and we have that ability, then that is the most practical option to line those things up. So I reckon it's a very good trial and worth supporting.
I'll come to you, Mayor Bowen. So you're going to move the recommendation, just that we amend the recommendation to the Infrastructure Committee, not to the Council. Yes. You're happy with that? Okay, Mayor Bowen.
Oh, thank you, and happy to second it. Look, you're fully supportive. At the end of the day, it is a trial. It lines up through the winter period, which is key, I think. from a business point of view, under the Food Act, we've had, dogs in our courtyard for many, many years and never had any issues. I think you go to other cities, I was in Christchurch yesterday and, walking through Bunnings, or a couple of days ago, walking through Bunnings and, there was dogs around. So a lot of, retailers are taking a pretty supportive view as well. The key thing probably my question is, how do you measure success? Is it 1 bark for no, 2 barks for yes? It's what does it come down to? And that's going to be the one. We're going to get a lot of feedback directly and indirectly, and that's probably going to be the one. How do you measure success?
I think Ryan's probably the one who's best equipped to respond to that in terms of how the success or otherwise of the trial might be measured. So Ryan, if you're there, I'm able to throw to you, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I'm here. In a way, still in development. We didn't want to get into the details and do all the stakeholder engagement until we get the decision from the council today, but certainly all the city town trials, we've had both online surveys, paper surveys, and so on, so kind of reams of feedback, and we're pretty good at streaming that feedback. So for instance, with the First Fridays event series, we got different streams of feedback from artists who participated, from businesses that participated, from hospitality outlets that participated, and from general public. And so we can see kind of different groups of feedback from different sectors and evaluate that. So certainly we would do something similar with the dogs. We also have an increased presence now in the city, and more coming in the next week or two, of various kind of pedestrian counters and cameras and things like that just give us another layer of data. We've got some Bluetooth sniffers going in that can kind of give an indication of where people are in the city, how long they're staying, and so on. And so strategically locating those, we really do have layers of feedback, and each trial gets a pretty significant report of, kind of next steps. Are there further things we think we need to trial, and any longer term recommendations?
Thank you, Ryan. And if I may just add to that, I think council would get directly through our own channels feedback from animal control team and others, customer services, etc., as to how members of the public might feel the trial was going. I will also just note point 20 in the report speaks to a recent instance of Palmerston North City Council running a similar trial a few years ago. The key point there is that the public angst that they thought might eventuate, and that they had some reason to think might eventuate, did not materialise, and it was a well-supported and successful trial that's since been adopted permanently. I'm not necessarily saying that the Timaru District residents are the exact equivalent of Palmerston North, but we can take that comparison as we wish.
Thank you, Brian. Is any other questions? Yes, Councillor Pillington.
Just a couple of things. If we're going to do it, I think the map's stupid. I'm walking south down Stafford Street and I've got to turn left or right at Church and Strathallan Street and go the other way. People, you're either going to have a trial and let people, dogs come in the bay, onto the Stafford Street. I just think the map's telling people this is where you can walk and you can't go the south end of Stafford Street, but then you loop up, is kind of silly. And B, I want to know what a fun code of conduct is.
Ryan, are you able to address those two ideas? Just technical details, I'm afraid I'm not fully across.
You're exactly right, Councillor Piddington. The idea is that dogs will be allowed anywhere in the city, so it's not limited to a certain route. It's just not enforcing the current ban along a certain stretch of Stafford and in the Royal Arcade. The idea of the map was actually just to help encourage people come in and kind of make use of the trial that's underway. There were quite a few, so the idea for the trial originated with the Hospitality Association, South Canterbury, and then some hospitality outlets that are members of the CBD group. It was at a couple meetings and conversations with them that this came up as a kind of hot topic. And so there's quite a few local businesses, some retailers, but mostly eateries, who said they would put on kind of special events if there's a trial happening for, say, a month, that they would put on special products or make sure that they had dog bowls out and kind of made a bigger deal of it. So the idea of the map was just giving people a route that links up some of those dog-friendly businesses, and maybe will encourage more people to take use of the trial so that we get more feedback and data during the trial. But it's not saying that's not meant to indicate that's the only direction you can go with a dog.
And your second question, Councillor Pennington, was?
Fun code of conduct.
A fun code of conduct, please.
I don't know that there's much I can say about that. I'm just saying that these things don't, I mean, there's already all of the requirements about keeping your dog under control and keeping dogs on leads and so on and so forth still apply. So it's not lifting all of the elements of the council policy and so on. I'm not sure where the phrase fun code of conduct came from, sorry, but I guess maybe just a way of making it not sound fierce and unappealing.
Thank you. Councillor Pye.
Thank you. I know you talked about communications in one of the reports that are there, but what level of comfort or what do you have planned? Because I think this, everything normally comes down to how well you do the communications, and whether this is a success or not, or the amount of backlash we get will be based on the comms. So just wondered if you could give us some comfort around the level of communications that will go out.
I'll begin answering that and then again throw over to Ryan, although I think it's probably fair to say that it's early days in terms of that communications strategy. I think the previous trials that have been undertaken have given some experience in terms of what channels work and which ones don't, and also building that stakeholder network in order to get those effective communications out. Ryan, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree that as a trial, it's mostly a comms exercise. And so actually the very first conversation that we had when it came up as an idea back in April, I think it was last year, was with Stephen Doran to see what his take on it was. And so he was actually the first person to come out in support of it and say that it was something he thought his team could handle. So that was that, I absolutely agree. It's vital. I mean, we'll develop a plan with Stephen. I think now the next steps will be, if council approves the trial, then the next steps would be to re-engage with some of the businesses and other key stakeholders in the city that were involved and make sure that we set a good time frame. And we want it to be while dogs are allowed in the Caroline Bay Beach tidal area, but it doesn't have to be from 1st of March. So we could choose to time April or May and give ourselves more lead time to get all the comms right. But that'll be something we decide with Stephen in the room for sure.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we do want the trial to be a success. So we will be doing as much comms as we can to basically point out that this is happening, but also to promote it as well and encourage people to try it out. That's the purpose.
Yeah. Sorry, I just had to obviously provide reassurance to anyone that might have any concerns about the methods and measures that are in place to mitigate any potential harm.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah.
Councillor Scott.
So I appreciate there's been plenty of work go on before in this space, but I don't see this adding any benefit or enhancement to our city, and I actually don't think everyone wants to navigate dogs when they're out doing errands in the city. So I actually don't support a trial, so I thought I'd just table that. My conversations with people over the weekends, building my own knowledge was not supportive of at all. So today I do not support this trial at all. I think it adds no value or enhancement to our city.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Any further questions? Okay, so we have Councillor Burt has moved it, Mayor Bowen has seconded it. No further discussion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Councillor Scott? Carried. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Very good. Good discussion. Okay, let's keep moving. We'll move to 7.2 on page 40, and I'd like to welcome Mr. Ashley Harper, the Three Waters legislation update, to advise the Infrastructure Committee on the status of the government's legislation program associated with the Three Waters. And there's two bills, and I think you're in a position now to discuss about any potential submissions.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. Happy New Year to councillors. Yeah, it's given me pleasure to give council an update on the legislation. The Taumata Arawai is operating, up and running. Water Service Entities Act is now up and running. The amendment bill is before the Economic Efficiency and Consumer Protection Bill are before the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee. Submissions have been called for, and my colleague, Mr. Lowe, has been monitoring what others are writing, because these are huge pieces of legislation, and we are not in a position to examine them ourselves and to try and figure out what we might have to say and recommend to council. So my colleague, Mark, has been monitoring what others are doing, and will provide some comment about whether we should or should not make a submission and how we might get that in within the next fortnight, because there is, as you can see, top of page 41, a tight time frame for that, because it's due for local government 17th of February, and then the hearings have already been scheduled for those February, March dates, with a report back to Parliament in May.
Thank you, Ashley. So I guess, like Ashley said, we're sort of in the early stages of considering what a submission might look like. There's a lot of detail on that in terms of the bills. Obviously, with the two bills out for consultation, essentially they set out, I guess, the technical detail of the Three Waters infrastructure and service delivery approach that is enforced or introduced under the Water Services Entities Act, which sets up the 4 new entities. Our deadline for those submissions is the 17th of February for local government. So I guess our position probably at the moment, and looking for support or guidance from you, is to sort of prepare high-level submissions on the bills in terms of some of the key areas that are being highlighted. So as a suggestion at this point, I'm sort of assuming that council would maintain its opposition to the Three Waters reforms as they currently stand, and that we would support the submissions of C4LD as they are being prepared against the bills. Obviously, there's a number of points that LGNZ and Taitoura have raised, and the Canterbury Mayoral Forum also are preparing some submission, I think, on the consumer protection one. So we'd look to support that, but some of the other areas that we might want to potentially focus on are the time, I guess, to put this system up. You know, we're basically looking, as at today, 17 months for a new system covering Three Waters to be in place in New Zealand, starting 1st of July 24. In terms of some of the other areas, there's what's called mixed-use rural water supplies in the bill, which there is the opportunity potentially to transfer those into, I guess, community ownership, if you like. But the process there is it's quite high bar. There's a very high bar to get there, so we could comment around that aspect. A key aspect, I guess, is around ensuring that the entity has clear relationships with all of those other infrastructure providers that have services in the corridor, so your telecom and your power and so on, that all those relationships are well set up. And I guess that also, in terms of the relationship of the entity with councils, that's a very strong relationship, and that relationship going forward enables those services to be flawlessly delivered. There's potentially some comment around the controlled drinking water catchments, so that's introduced in the bill, which I guess protect some of those areas, and just clarification around that. Stormwater management plans, what they look like, the responsibility for preparation. There's also some clauses in the bill that talk about the ongoing funding collection by TA, so post the entities being stood up on the 1st of July, that councils would be still responsible for collecting water charges, I suppose, and just passing those on to the entity over a short period of time. So I think it's about 5 years or something. So there's information in the bill about how that works, what that would mean, but obviously there needs to be some pretty strong agreements in place as to how that might work and cover all the bases. Some clarification, I guess, around the impact on our bylaws, whether there's, so basically our bylaws would no longer apply from the 1st of July once these entities are in place, and whether there's implications of that for what our bylaws currently are, and I guess the whole aspect of geographic average pricing. So what that means is that over time, I guess, there'd be cross-subsidisation across the entities of all water supplies. So effectively, once that charging regime is put in place, we'd be cross-subsidising other communities across Entity 4. So that's some of the areas, and I guess the first question is, do you want to submit at that sort of high level on the bills from a council perspective, and are there any other areas that particularly you want to focus on?
Thank you, Mark. So just for our understanding, so today we're going to talk about whether we are going to submit to the bills, correct?
Yes, and in particular if there's any other areas that you've picked up that you'd like us to comment on.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That was quite a lot of information.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and it's we don't have a draft submission at this point,
right.
But obviously there's still a bit of work to go to get there.
Sure.
We're dealing with 5 submissions at the moment to high level government forms. So
you're seeking a steer whether we are going to submit and then go from there. Yep. Okay. I'll open up.
Yeah, there are a lot of regional submissions that are going on at the moment. Yeah, there's the Mayoral Forum putting a submission, CL4D are putting in one, and Local Government New Zealand, of course, has put in one as well. So.
Yes, I guess it's about, from Timaru District Council's perspective, aligning our position with what position you want to take. And I assume that we're still following the C4LD line in terms of our opposition to the bills. We could just submit on the basis of saying that we support the C4LD position and don't go into much more depth than that. But I guess that's the sort of guidance I'm seeking today.
So with the CD4 and the mural submission, I'm just thinking of whether we are just repeating or submitting for the sake of submitting when a lot of those points will be covered into other submissions that we're part of. Mayor Bowen.
Yeah, look, I think we should keep our opposition going and submit, even if it's supporting Communities for Local Democracy. I don't want to drop out now because we do oppose it. One question I did have though, Mark, you were talking about rural schemes could fall into community hands. I don't know that I'd support that if the rest of Three Waters is gone, because what expertise would we have within the building to run one scheme, a one-off scheme? I wasn't quite sure.
No, for clarification, the proposal, and I don't think it particularly applies to us, is that it would not transfer, but it would not stay with council because there's already a high degree of community involvement with the scheme. We don't have that situation. Our schemes are all managed by us, not by any community collectives, and therefore they would transfer. And so I don't think that relates to us, whereas I know in some other councils they have scheme committees that are involved on the ground working the shovels and so on. We're not in that position, and so therefore I don't think we would end up with a scheme left with us that we wouldn't have staff to manage.
So what the Act or the legislation does set up is the opportunity for that to happen. So it's not saying that they would fall into community hands, but that transfer opportunity and there's a whole system and approach behind that. That opportunity is in the bill, and like I said, there's quite a high bar to get there.
Yeah, I agree. My understanding is it wouldn't affect any of our schemes. Ours are even down into being rural. It's way too big for that. It's just smaller, sort of on-farm rural schemes from my analysis. But look, I think the key things for us is, one, we probably need to measure that everyone's still on the same page, because we've got a new council since we last took that position. But I think from my involvement is that our values still align very much with C4LD, and so that should be the crux of our submission, and so that's probably a good start, along with we just need to check where Mayoral Forum direction goes. So probably the key things that we do need to be mindful of, I think water fees at any point, if it were to change, being taken by council is a big no, and that shouldn't occur under any circumstance, because I think that's just going to muddy the waters further. I think that's probably easy for an entity to use us, and you start taking the money, you might end up taking the money for another 10 years. So that we should have a firm position that we don't take the fees for an outside entity. Also, I think a couple of the things need to align with their values as presented in the court case, which is around property rights, which is we've been really hard on, and one of these bills is around taking property from councils to these entities. So we're going to be in line with that, and also that accountability back through local democracy where we can. And probably it's in the last act, the Consumers Act, that I've had no clarity from anyone I've spoken to, is that when we talk about our own asset management plans and our planning that we've done, no one yet that I've talked to at DIA or central government has clarified that our plans will keep moving forward. And I think that's probably key in that consumer space, that the work that we've already done and the plans for our communities that we already have in place are upheld within this legislation. And I think that probably marries to the consumer protection in some shape or form. I'm not sure how we include that, but those are probably my points that I believe we need to include. But on the crux of it, I think C4LD's work will closely align to ours, and that will help the team, because I understand that you are under a lot of pressure. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. Before I go to the floor, I just think it would, going on from Mayor Bowen's report there regarding our position on the opposition against Three Waters, that if anyone would like to speak to that before we move forward with anything else, or if everyone's got a level of comfort. Yes, Jan, I'll welcome you. You can welcome you up to the table. I'm just checking that it's about the opposition to Three Waters. Yeah, that's okay.
It's just something that I'm interested in, and you did refer to it before, Mark, but really to find out and to press hard to find, what would the future governance of things that are infrastructure that's related to Three Waters look like? Because it's going to get very complex when you've got a split. Things that are currently governed, through a council being split up like that, it could get really complicated. And I guess it's just to ensure that there is very little chance of some of those things like roading and so on, governance being taken away, decision making on building, that sort of stuff. So just to find out what the intent is, and maybe to represent the council's interest in that respect.
Thank you, Jan. Any questions? Oh, you can, Mr. Harper.
The Three Waters is about Three Waters, so there's a very robust process being developed for identifying assets that are to be to pump stations and the like. So the process does not encompass other activities other than Three Waters. Right, thank you.
Any questions, comments? Councillor Booth.
Just a couple of things. Mayor raised C4LD. Obviously, we're part of that group, so I would have thought our submission, we would be putting input into that submission. So therefore, it's you've got those key councils. They would agree generally on the right stuff that we would agree with in regards around opposition. I just also noted about the taking the fees or the income. I know we collect these fees for ECAN, and there's a monetary value in that for the council. It might be to the tune, say, for instance, of $100,000. And so I would assume that those numbers are actually going to get quite big around water. And so I just think that before we actually shoot ourselves in the foot for that, we should actually know how much that's worth to the ratepayer as an ongoing piece of income. So that's that's all I'd like to say.
Yeah, so just on the fee recovery, I mean, the legislation allows for cost recovery from councils for that to happen, so it's not just us doing it. There would be a cost recovery agreement in place, but as Mayor Bowen has indicated, you're keen for that not to be part of it at all, essentially.
Yeah, that's my view, and I would assume your support, but I'm not sure. But just on the C4LD, I've got a meeting on Thursday, so I assume it's probably on that, influencing that direction for that submission.
I guess, mate, we don't need to duplicate what's already being done.
Thank you. So I'm getting a stare that we want to submit, but maybe we also want to see what C4LD. Oh, yes, Mr. Karen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I offer a suggestion that on the C4LD is meeting, and I think it is on Thursday, and it's to look at, because they've engaged some work on these bills. We've got a meeting on the 14th of February as a council. Could I suggest that we bring back at that point the submission that we would make, because I would expect it will very much align with the C4LD submission. And they engage people who can do the analysis of some of the proposals inside the bill. I think the 17th of February is when the submission is due, so we would have time to bring back one, at least a draft at that point, if that would assist.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe, is that in the scheme of working through submissions, would those dates work for you?
Well, it's not really up to me, to be honest, so we'll just do what we can.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Burt. Do you want to speak?
No, I was, again, just getting that endorsement into Councillor Booth's position around potentially collecting fees. It's very ironic for government to even suggest that would be a position when they're taking ownership away from us, and I don't want to use your term muddying waters. It's a bad analogy in this section, but that would in fact potentially conflict with our views in terms of making sure it's completely separate and that we maintain control.
Okay, can we look at the recommendations? So at the moment, the recommendation is that the Infrastructure Committee receives and notes through what is legislation update. We possibly need to put a second one in that the Infrastructure Committee confirms they wish to make a submission, and this to be brought to the draft to be brought to council on the 14th of February. That's all I need to conclude.
That would work.
That's all I need to include.
Yes,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
I'm happy to move that. Thank you, Councillor Bowen. All those in Mayor Bowen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Because we have got someone coming in. Is that all right?
I did email them to say about 20,
Ah.
so I figured this might take 10 minutes.
Sweet, that's fine. Okay, we'll continue on 7
We've
point.
got PDP coming in as well.
Okay, 7.3. So fluoridation of Timaru District's community drinking water scheme. So the purpose of this report is to formulate a response to the request from the Director General of Health regarding the potential fluoridation of 8 Timaru District water supplies. It potentially has a matter of high significance for our community, although it sits outside our mandate as council. I think it's quite a complex report, and I think we need to take some time just to work through it and the options to consider the financial impact, the staffing levels to deliver it, and then the health outcomes for our community and how we can make sure that we're looking at it holistically and in a timely manner. So I'll open the floor to you, Mr. Harper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as one of the Drainage and Water team, I've been asked to do a little bit of work on fluoridation. And in the report, it is reinforced time and again that in fact council's not the decision maker about whether fluoridation will be introduced. That is under legislation the Director General of Health. Council's role is to determine via a submission due this week what its preferred timeframes is. And so in the recommendations we have stipulated for each of our 7 schemes that we believe is appropriate to be fluoridated if a directive were received. We have put the months there, how many months from approval and so on. And then on the next page, at the bottom of page 47, we've got a table of the proposed, what we think is the estimated costs. And note that the high cost for Waitui is not part of what we're recommending because the new Te Anawai water treatment plant is operating very successfully, and in the 1 to 2 years we believe Waitui won't be required. And so there's some further network upgrades required, and then Waitui may well be not required. And so we're not suggesting that that be approved in any form by anybody at this time, because it would be money that may well be not required. And so the background here is that the lead times for each of those schemes depend clearly on what's required at each site. So for Timaru, we're suggesting that the lead time be associated with the microfiltration upgrade. Temuka, there's a pump station and so on being built at the time. We need to extend that. Downlands and Timona, we've got new water treatment plants, and inside those plants there's space for fluoridation, and so it wouldn't be difficult to acquire the equipment and so on and install. But where there's building works, as in Pleasant Point and Temuka, we'd need time to do the building works. At Seadown and Jordan, we've got land purchase, so we've allowed extra time for land purchase. So each one of those has been looked at on a case-by-case basis to come up with those timeframes. And we've also become aware in the last 12 months, since we made an initial submission a year ago about what we thought our costs would be, we were aware that Taumata Arawai setting some of the rules around fluoridation and some of the risk management, so on, requires more complex equipment and systems than we had anticipated from our historical knowledge, and so that's included in those estimates. We're also saying that council, if it was to be in the affirmative for doing something, and look, there is no council policy on this at this time, then the earliest it could reasonably happen is 1 July this year, and then we would kick off the project, and it's possible on our assessment for the 2 9-month schemes, that's Te Anawai and Te Moana, to be installed and operational next financial year, but the others would then fall into the following year. And so there'll be a partial spend next financial. We're saying that should all be done by loan, because then that would transfer to the new entity. The loan and the equipment and the operation would transfer to the new entity. But council has other options. If it decides that it doesn't want to act in the affirmative, then it can delay its proposed timeframe and advise the Director General of its position. Whether that's acceptable or not, of course, the Director General will determine. And so This is a submission process. This is not a final decision process. Should council go with what we've recommended and the program of work start from 1 July this year, then there would be some charges next year. It's not the full cost because it's spread over the duration of the implementation project. And for next financial, there would be minimal operational cost because it would be a couple of months at the end of the year only for a couple of schemes. So that wouldn't be very high at all. And the last comment I have is, in the recommendations, I could have been a little clearer when I said that the start of fluoridation be 1 July. What I really meant to say was start of the fluoridation project, because we couldn't be fluoridating from 1 July because it's going to take us 9 months to get the kit here or to order it to get it here, assuming the supply chain can respond, and there will be multiple authorities seeking plant and equipment. And so it's really start of the project from 1 July. We're not suggesting at all that we start now because that means our ordinary work program would have, in some respects, would have to be delayed because we are stretched doing our BAU without doing this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. That was a question first off. So you say the earliest we could possibly start the 1st of July. When you say that, is that purely looking at the financials or is that looking at the resources of staff and what we need to do, knowing that business as usual, current vacancies that we currently have, are we looking at purely, when you say that, purely financials or looking at the bigger picture of everything?
Both, to be frank. Right now, there is no approved financials, so there is no funding, but there's also no resource to be able to do the work. But come by 1 July, given that we're, I and others are in discussions with the group manager about our employment and so on, I think we could have a project initiated and could commence on 1 July if that was council's wish. Right? But we wouldn't be doing much of the work in-house, we'd be using external resources for that.
Thank you, because I think the options on page 49 are good for councillors to be looking through 15 through to 17. I'll take any questions from the floor. Oh, sorry.
No.
All right. Any questions from the floor? Councillor Birch.
And I'm happy to move the preferred option, and based on the caveat that this is happening to us, and the option clearly around doing it through loans so that it's an easy transition if we're overtaken by Three Waters is obviously the practical option. We need to do the legwork in terms of understanding what that means for us and in terms of budget and resourcing and everything like that. So I think it's better to front foot it. We've got to obviously get back to the Director General by the 2nd of February with what our determination is. So I'm happy to move that we move with option 2.
Just one question. Actually, I'm just a bit confused over the funding situation. So in attachment 3 from the Ministry of Health, they say that some funding will be available to support local authorities with the capital costs of fluoridation. But then under option 2, you say there's no government funding available.
So the offer of government funding for was tranche 1, which happened last year. So about a year ago, the Director General issued directives to a number of councils for a number of water schemes for $11 million that was available. That was consumed, that's gone. I checked with Wellington and they said no, the latest requirement is makes no comment about funding available, therefore there is none available.
Thank you.
At this time.
Mayor Bowen.
Look, I'm happy to support the recommendations, but maybe just an amendment that we request capital from central government. We know the answer, but let's ask the question anyway.
Councillor Burt, are you happy with that amendment for the recommendations? That we seek funding from... Okay, so we've got the recommendations. A mover, a seconder. I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, just a clear point of interest, all that. So
under the subject.
Okay, we're moving on to report 7.4, magnesium peer review.
Manganese.
Pardon?
Sorry, the subject was manganese.
Manganese. What did I say?
Magnesium.
Oh.
Slightly different. But an important difference, I might add.
Absolutely. So we've got Peter Callender and Tim Davey on Zoom. And this report is to advise the Infrastructure Committee of the Science Advice Report prepared by Environmental Canterbury and the issue and the peer review that was commissioned by TDC.
Yes, which Peter Callender did as the peer reviewer.
Right. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, I've, as part of the Drains and Water team, I've put this report together. Tim Davey from ECAN, who wrote responsible for signing off the science review, and Peter Callender have been invited to join us. I did email them to say likely to be 11:20, and I've just emailed them again to say please join up now. So we're on time. Hopefully they can join us to answer questions. So, as you know, we had this time last year, we're in the middle of a manganese issue emanating from the Opahi water source. We have put together a summary report here of the science. So ECAN in July and August prepared a science report with a short peer review that arrived with us. Chief Executive and team suggested we do a peer review, which we hired Peter Callender, a recognised expert who has provided, I'd have to say, a very comprehensive peer review report. It came to us in draft form. There was a couple of things in there that I didn't particularly understand, so I then sent it back for checking, and we checked a couple of things. We've also provided it to ECAN, who were happy with and said it didn't misrepresent any of what they were saying. And so we now have this report, and it's really interesting in that in a short sentence, the peer review confirms ECAN's science report, but it perhaps is not quite as definitive as to the source. But certainly it's gone through all the numbers and so on, and it's a very comprehensive science record of the situation that we found ourselves in. And so we're happy to, and Grant, my manager, is certainly well versed in the subject and can help with any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, do you want open to the floor? Councillor Bruce?
And our two, Tim and Peter are online, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So I guess, obviously, the leachate, silage leachate, has been identified as the most probable cause. There was a silage pit right next door to our intake. Now, I'd like to know, ECAN is the regulator. So who's responsible, and is there permission required to actually put a silage pit, build a silage pit? And there's certainly regulations, and each silage pit that is actually built, they should be, you need a consent from the regulatory authority, and I assume that's ECAN. And so why was there a consent for that silage pit in the first place? And if there was, why was it allowed to be put within a community drinking water scheme intake regulated area?
So I'll see if Mr. Tim Davey from ECAN would like to respond to that.
Tim, I presume you can hear us. We can't hear you at all. Can we please check you got your mic on? Just checking, Peter, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine, but I can't hear Tim.
And we can hear you as well, and that's all crystal clear. So, Tim,
Tim, would you like to exit and come back in and see if a fresh connection gives you some sound?
Or Tim, if your screen's the same as mine, on the bottom left-hand bar, there's a mute, unmute microphone symbol. No, he's gone.
For the purposes of the exercise, perhaps Ashley, you might be able to just enlighten us.
well, yes, I can, and I'm not answering for ECAN, but the activity does require a consent, and it doesn't have a consent. However, having said that, our report is about the science. This is not an incident report, which goes through all the planning and responsibilities and so on. This is about the science of what we found and the review of that science to make sure that we understand it.
There are rules.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, there are rules around silage leachate throughout the country, and they're all it's well documented. And so the people that are responsible, the regulators of where the farmer is able to make use of his land for instance, a silage pit, I would have thought would be responsible for making sure there's a resource consent for a particularly large silage pit in the first place, and actually the placement of that silage pit not within 500 metres of a community water scheme, which is quite clear. And obviously perhaps the conditions of the high rainfall prior, a couple of events may have caused the high leachate to elevate the levels of the manganese at the different times. But it happened, and the reason we had the discoloration was because the silage pit was actually in the location it was. It wasn't supposed to be there. It didn't have a consent, and the regulated authority, who was ECAN, did not do anything about it. And unfortunately, we've actually been using ECAN as the people to investigate themselves in the neglect of them supposed to actually be implementing the regulations to actually mitigate situations like this or stop them happening in the first place.
So, Councillor Booth, I'm just going to stop you there because this is about the report, the science behind it. It's not about whether a consent was done. It's shown in this report that ECAN's report was of a fair and just investigation. And it also showed that it was likely caused by the silage pit. So that's what has been established. So by doing our peer review, which we have done, it's given us confidence that ECAN had done the investigation to a satisfactory level.
And to what point?
To what point? That the peer
Surely we
review...
want to know what the cause of this was and who's responsible, and it actually should never have happened in the first place. Is that not more important than the science?
It's a different matter. It's a different matter. I think, and also we do not have a definitive conclusion that the silage pit was the source, because there was actually, in fact, further sources upstream of the silage pit as well, which were identified as part of the science report. So there is some doubt. It's not absolutely certain that it came from that silage pit. It was a likely cause, but it is not proven as such.
Yeah,
I'm not disputing that the silage pit shouldn't have not been there, but what this report is about the peer review on the ECAN's report.
Well, yeah, I guess what I'm getting at, if ECAN hadn't been doing their job, we wouldn't be talking about this.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Mayor Bowen.
Look, on Councillor Booth's point, I think the key thing moving forward for us is that we have confidence from both our own water team and also ECAN's team that those water protection zones are being monitored and activity that is sitting with them is appropriate. And I mean, that's up to ECAN in regard to the consenting, but it is appropriate. And probably I would expand on the fact, and I know this is hard for those rural community that have water protection zones on their property as far as what they can and can't do on them, but are they of adequate size? So that's the key things moving forward from this that I believe we should be asking of ECAN, and I'm sure the team have probably done that.
So I'd like to welcome Tim back, and Tim, just open the floor to you for any comments, responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm presuming you can hear me now, and apologies for not being able to connect earlier. Look, just in terms of what Mayor Bowen has said there, I get there's several things, there are several factors, and I don't want to delve into detail in the report, and I won't. The drinking water protection zones were set up, I just can't quite remember the date, but I think it was about 2016 or somewhere around there. They came in through one of our Land and Water Regional Plan variations. There are activities already in place in those drinking water protection zones, and this was an example of one where there already was a silage pit in place. Obviously, it is easier to pick up new consents when they come in than it is activities already there. Having said that, we were aware of the activity, and we had been working with the farmer around them. The drinking water protection zones are actually set up, it's about risk and vulnerability, and we're trying to assess different factors. And what you've got to think about is the source of the water. So if we're talking about a surface water take, for example, in the Pariora Gorge, where you take one of your supplies, or from groundwater, which is more akin to the Opahi, although it's a little bit, the Opahi is a very shallow groundwater take, and that would be the other distinction I make between shallow groundwater and deep groundwater. Now, as an example, the drinking water protection zone that has been set up around the Opahi take, that is the concern here, is about 350 hectares. That's a really large area. The reason for that is because it's a shallow take, and we're wanting to control the land use within that large area. If it was a deep groundwater take, and I just looked up an example earlier of one not terribly far, just a little bit south in the Waimate area, a deep groundwater take, when the drinking water protection zone is about 5 hectares. So it's a lot less. In that 350 hectare area, we're controlling for all sorts of different contaminants. The main one we're concerned about, particularly because of shallow, is fecal contamination. So that's things like septic tanks. It's also feed pads and intensive agricultural areas where you might have a large area of concentration of fecal matter. So that's one of the things, but we're also controlling, for example, around petrol tanks, petrol storage, petrochemical storage, pesticide storage, all of these things, timber treatment, all of these things within a water protection zone are to be controlled. And we're trying to look at what's, any new consents, but also what are the current consents. As an example, in shallow groundwater, we regularly find fecal contamination, and when I say shallow, I'm talking about less than 20 to 30 meters. And the take that in the Opahi Gallery is about 5 meters deep. So it's a regular thing to find fecal contamination to 5, 10, even 20 meters depth after heavy rainfall. It's not something that you regularly find across the Canterbury Plains, but after heavy rainfall, it is something that you do find. We've observed it in shallow wells. It's not all of the time, but it's not uncommon. And I guess the last point I would just make is around the heavy rainfall. Given climate change predictions and what we're seeing already across the country, much heavier rainfall intensities, this is an increased risk where there are shallow supplies. So we're trying to manage that. We're doing it through managing the land use within these areas. There are multiple types of land use that can affect it. Silage pits is one of them, and as the report just describes, that's because of a complex chemistry that goes on. It's not just it's not actually the silage itself that's necessarily the problem. It's some of the chemistry that goes on in the groundwater. We're doing our best to manage that. It has certainly raised awareness, and we've run a campaign around identifying silage pits in these areas, particularly where they've been in place for a long time and you wouldn't necessarily know about it. The rules themselves are relatively straightforward, but for example, you can have a silage pit. It's just got to be contained and below a certain size. And that's, so it's not an absolute straightforward yes or no. So that's as much as I want to say, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Booth, do you have any reply?
I guess is the new silage pit that he's transferred everything, is that contained? Is that got a properly built?
I must confess I don't know, but I do know that it has moved out of the area, the zone, the drinking water protection zone.
Mr. Harper.
So we're focused now on going forward, and so in our report from paragraph 13, there is 4 initiatives that we have taken, because this situation is dynamic, and from a year ago it has changed a little. So we've installed valving. We've now got our water treatment operators with better tools, handheld meters that weren't available before. We're also installing across a number of sites online real-time monitoring, and so if there are any significant changes in water quality, we can pick that up. And then, of course, at the new microfiltration plant, we'll be able to treat more turbid water from the likes of the Pariora source. Therefore, we become less reliant on a single source, and so we're starting to reduce the risk. As Councillor Booth said, this is about risk and so on, and we're reducing that risk. And as well as that, there's a number of regulatory issues. Under the Taumata ROI, the water safety plan criteria has changed. We now have to also prepare catchment risk management plans, and so part of that is accepting some responsibility for monitoring what's happening in the catchment. So part of our staff training is now we're going to go out there with eyes wide open to see what's going on in those drinking water protection zones, because we understand now that we have some responsibilities for that weren't obvious or evident before. And so we've and we've also hired, as part of changing staff structure and so on, a compliance officer who will be checking up on ourselves to make sure we are complying with all the things that we should be doing, and that reduces the risk again. The district plan, very comprehensive and voluminous document. We have persuaded our planning friends to put in the maps in there where the drinking water protection zones are. Not only the ones that belong to us, but also those that belong to others that go into our district. And there's also some of ours, of course, in other districts. So it's a little bit of a complicated geographical sort of issue that we've now got some more visibility over. And I think at this stage we've sort of got to the end of the road with this manganese science at this time. We've got all these actions in place, it's underway, and I'd like to think that we can sort of put a bow around the file and learn from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Any questions?
Yeah, I guess I just want to follow Mayor Nigel's point though. What are we doing? I accept the report and I accept what's happened and we move forward, but are we actually joining with ECAN and doing something rigorous about those zones where we know we're getting water? There's been a sort of, we're having a bit of a look. I want to see the plan going forward to help ensure that the drinking water that we are getting, something like this doesn't happen again. And I haven't seen any of that in what we've just talked about.
Yeah, I think the fact that we've identified a number of initiatives here, both from us and also in the regulatory environment, that is about making sure it doesn't happen again. That is the improvement actions that we're planning to take. And we're certainly, learning from it.
Mr. Hall.
Grant.
Yeah, if I may. So yes, the the risk management plans, which are, have just been updated, now include for the catchment risk management plans. And so that is quite a comprehensive a look at maintaining those protection zones. So as Ashley said, there's quite a change of emphasis in terms of our responsibility in relation to monitoring those catchment plans. And so that they are now part of the risk management plan process, and so we're developing those. They're progressing, and one of the other aspects that I think within the Water Services Legislation Bill, there is part of the regulatory function there is that designating controlled drinking water catchment areas and the production of controlled drinking water catchment plans. So that's all part of the work going forward, and certainly we are carrying out greater rigour in terms of the risk within those catchments.
But I'm right that he can grant the consents and control it, or has that changed as well? Because I just want to make sure we're linking with them, because they seem a bit lost.
Oh no, absolutely linking with them. We're aware of the work that Tim's team, ECAN team, have done in the catchments. They're out there examining, checking to see what's going on and identifying where there are compliant and then perhaps some non-compliant silage pits, right? And other things that are non-compliant. You know, it's just not silage pits, it's a whole range of activities. And we've strengthened that control environment by our own district plan has got more specific exclusions from within those zones. But one of the issues is actually making landowners aware that there is a drinking water protection zone on their land. And so that's part of our work in terms of our operators being out and about and making sure that we've got some connection with the activity that's happening in those drinking water zones. So, you know, and I'll say it again, these improvement initiatives and the regulated environment, there's a whole raft of things here that are underway that will contribute to reducing all the risk. Having said that, there's no absolute guarantee it won't happen again, but we're doing all those things there to make sure that the risk is minimised and as far as we can, remove that risk.
Thank you. Mayor Bowen.
I think, I think probably just for so governance can be happy, once that work's done as far as that risk management, I see it's being worked through still, can we just have some visual of what that looks like moving forward, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. We can certainly do a report and provide examples of those catchment risk plans. Happy to.
Thank you. And just to Dr. Tim's point around the shallow water galleries versus deep bore. Obviously, deep bore has some complexities, costs in those, but you're still comfortable that for this time, that's still fit for purpose, the gallery at those sites.
And yes, to confirm that, yes, absolutely. The deep groundwater is one, either not there or not appropriate in terms of its quality. So, yep.
So, with the recommendation, do you want to include that to that a report comes back? Do you want it formalised, Mayor Bowen?
Yes, Madam Chair, we had a second one saying that information and examples of risk management plans be provided to elected members.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you.
What do you think?
Yeah. Okay. Mayor Bowen, are you happy to move the recommendation? Yeah. Lovely. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Shannon. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried.
And Madam Chair, I'd like to thank our attendees, and there was no questions for Peter, but we still appreciate you being online and for doing that peer review, because I thought it was actually a fantastic document in terms of explaining it to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move into minor nature now, and I welcome Mr. Ryan Dejoux up to the table. Ryan, generally with public forum, it's like 10 minutes. Usually with public forum, it's about 10 minutes. Thank you. The floor is yours, and you can run it whether you want to take questions along the way or wait to the end.
Well, look, I'm happy for questions at any stage.
Look, what I'm proposing, what we can see up there is a subdivision that is about 180 lots. It's part of the Adia Farm, which is not used at the moment by the City Council, so obviously you guys own it, and I want it. So we all know that in Timaru we just need more population. We want more sections, we want more people coming here. Getting a subdivision of this size is just not easy. And this is one of the areas which we've had some discussions, whether it's industrial or whether it's residential, but we're running out of residential areas, and the company that I am with, we own most of them, and we are developing those areas, but they're only 20 lot sites, and they're definitely not going to service Timaru coming forward. So going forward, it's going to be really hard to do subdivisions of any size because of stormwater and everything. It's just getting harder and harder and harder. So when these ones come up, we need to look at them seriously, and this is a good spot. This is everything seems, obviously it's 5 minutes from town. It's close to the new showgrounds, whether people like it or not. New development. It's got 3 or 4 schools close to it, and it's a good size. Like it's a community. It's going to, there's playgrounds. It's right beside Sir Arthur Park, so kids can use that. Whether there's new council development there, I'm not sure, but what we've done there, we've put in a a bike lane, because I understand there is one going in Washdyke Flat Road. So there's plenty of recreational areas. It's easily serviced. The water council have just put the water down there. There's sewer down there. There's plenty of power. There is water issues which we can control them, because obviously if you go outside with no umbrella you're going to get wet. So once the roof's on a lot of houses, we'll be able to control where that water goes. So we're going to be. One of the main thing is, where does industrial and residential start and stop? So there's a natural buffer where you can see the stream there, where we're going to plant that out. So there will be a natural buffer as well as our planting, which will be part of probably the swales, which will collect a lot of the stormwater and attenuate that. And where it goes, well, you can see we've got detention ponds at the bottom. So the sites will hopefully they'll range from about 500 square metres to no higher than 800. And we want the prices, we don't want them more than 250. We want them affordable, so we can keep we can keep people here and bring people here. Because at the moment we don't have that. And as I say, once again, like when the subdivisions of this size come about, you just can't not have a serious look at them, because I have dealt with, we had a meeting with the two guys, I'm not sure, Nigel, who they were, the two planners you got brought in from Spaceland or wherever they came from, who were, they were trying to tell us where, everyone should be going and building. And unfortunately they don't live in Timaru, and they've probably never been here. So what they propose is all correct, is all wrong. Like, with this subdivision, it's just large scale, everything can be done cheaper. We can, and that's where we can get the prices cheaper. So, I don't know, it's just something that's serious for Timaru, because we're Timaru's largest developers, and we just can't see anywhere else where we can go without your help in offloading a wee bit of that. It's only a small area, and if we want to fill that Theatre Royal up with lots of people, we need lots of houses, and that's one of the spots where we can start. And that's just a start really for us. We've got the ability to go next door, which will be a wee bit harder, but who knows?
How much land is there, Ryan?
There is about, I think it's about 6, 7 hectares.
I'll take some questions from the floor. Any questions for Ryan? Councillor Pennington.
Thanks, Ryan. Having been in council for 3 years and seen the other proposals, College Road, Kanua Road, things that I don't think people are attracted to, I've changed my mind and I think this is a good idea moving forward to at least explore it, take it to the next step, because it's flat land. If you're on the northern boundary, you get a good view. So I'd like to see it move forward. But one question to you, Ryan, is we have a lot of people come and say this is going to be the price, and the prices go up. What sort of guarantee could you give us that some of these sections will in fact be 250k? Because if they land at 330, we're no further ahead in attracting young people to affordable housing.
Well, that's where the council, the council have got a role to play too, because you can't just go charging it depends on what your contributions, you got to charge us for contributions. Obviously, what the value of the land, which, well, hopefully we can acquire for next to nothing. But all of a sudden they're 350. So, and once again, it comes down to the scale. We'll do this in one go. So it's cheaper for the earth movers, everything's cheaper. We can nail the council down on contributions, and it's just a lot easier to do. Doing a 5-lot subdivision is expensive. And in Pages Road, we're doing a 50-lot one coming up, and that's expensive. And they're all going to be 350 plus. So it's just, I just don't see that industrial, because industrial, it's getting too close to Spur Road, and Spur Road is one of our richest streets. So you can't have these guys coming down in Ferraris and Bentleys, and then you got people in blooming old trucks and utes and going into old shitty tin sheds, So it's not a great look. So it's just something that we want to do, and we're committed, and as soon as we get the go-ahead, we're into it. Because Timaru needs it. And we do need it, because I've spoke to a lot of building companies, and, I'm confident we'd have a lot of them gone within a year or two. Or it'll be full in a year or two anyway.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Initially I had reservations around the closeness or proximity to the industrial, and actually the overall spatial plan. We need to obviously be careful of what's going on, but obviously with the St Basil Arthur Park and that area in between, it does actually give that space, that separation, which is absolutely important. Obviously we are lacking scale, and this is scale, and so I guess the only question I've got is the fact that there's a creek there, and is that above the floodplain? Is that an issue, or?
Well, that'll all come into the engineering of the whole project. Looking how we're going to manage all the water, whether we put more swales and we make the things taller.
I guess
banks taller.
Yeah, and I think your comments around infill, where we'd had these other guys say, well, you've already got all this land, but actually it's what Councillor Pillington said it was just all rubbish and
Yeah.
no one would want to.
Well, with the infill's fine, but most of the infills are on the terrace, and if you're on the terrace, you won't be working because you've obviously got about 20 or 30 million. Because it's not really, she's a special group up there. So the infill isn't quite Timaru yet. Like, we're just not, people want their own block of land and.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is things like this aren't being considered because we're supposed to be considering those other.
That's right.
Parcels of land that are spare in the city at the moment, which are just simply not suitable. At some point they may be, but flat land and scale is going to give us cost efficiencies.
It's only going to get dearer.
And we need things like this to attract people. So it's one of the key things that is from an economic development point of view, VT. It keeps coming up and it keeps coming up. So thank you.
A lot, thanks, and thanks, Ryan. Look, I would support some officers working with Ryan around some analysis. It'd be interesting from our council point of view to understand. So we've got the proper options in front of us around land value, contributions, those sorts of things, challenges with infrastructure. I think that's something that would have to work together on. Obviously, when we're disposing of any of our land, there's particular processes, so I think we need some guidance on those sorts of things. And obviously there's some issues around consenting. It's currently, is it reserve, is it? Currently reserve?
Yeah, I think you've overlaid it with the residential, I think. I'm not sure, but...
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, we've got a bit to work with, but look, I'd be supportive of understanding more of what their options and issues are with this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, it is a fairly challenging piece of land. It's not as simple as it probably looks. It's not flat because there is actually a stop bank that runs on the other side of the stream there, which protects the Washdyke West area. This is on the other side of the stop bank, and it's therefore is designed to flood at the end of the day. So
we can change it though, can't we?
You can overcome that, but that comes at a cost, and that's why I question perhaps the $250,000 per lot, because it would have to be substantial.
Well, we do have scale there.
Yeah.
And, it's not a massive stop bank, so it will come at a cost, but that's where the council can help, at some stage we're going to have to go somewhere. So the council will have to play a part in helping out, because otherwise, well, we're not going to have the sites for people to move here. And I know what you're saying, engineering will get rid of that issue, whether we have to make bigger stop banks, more retention tanks, on-site attenuation, who knows, but there's got to be a way around it. You look at Rolleston and Christchurch, they're building on flood zones everywhere up there.
Yeah.
They just make it happen.
We can engineer it out, but it's just, I said, just highlight that cost. That's all I was going to.
Yeah, the cost is, that's right.
That will add to the cost.
Yeah.
It's not as cheap land as probably it looks, and we would have to involve ECAN in this discussion.
Yeah, that's right.
As well.
But the cost of doing it there compared to the cost of some of the other areas that you've highlighted, it's nothing compared to some of the areas where, you're going to be putting service. This is easily serviced. Those other areas aren't easily serviced. You're going to need, Edmund Hillary's going to have to come and put the pipes in because he's so steep, some of the areas that you've put in for residential, it's just not viable.
Thank you. So, as minor nature, it's a discussion, but if we can get some nods around the table as of a level of comfort for Ryan and council officers to discuss it further, I think that would be a fair result. Yeah, so there's a level of comfort. Okay, so thank you, Mr. De Joux, for coming in, and thank you for taking the time to look at this proposal and trying to enhance our population. So,
Always thinking of you lot.
big pardon?
I'll let you guys take all the credit for it too.
Okay, so that comes to the end of Infrastructure Committee. I'll now close it at 12 noon. Thank you.
Afternoon, team. Welcome to the Community Services Committee meeting, Tuesday, 31st January, just in case you've forgotten what the day was. I'd like to take apologies. We have apologies from Raywin Hessel, Ali Talbot and Jan Finlayson. Could I have a mover for those, please? Mayor, oh, I've got to get used to this. Mayor Bowen and Councillor Shannon. Okay, items of urgent business. Oh, all those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Identification of items of urgent business. We don't have any. Matters of minor nature. None. Anyone have declaration of conflicts of interest? None. Chairperson's report. So since we were last here, I've attended the Sister City Subcommittee meeting, the citizenship ceremony, Venture Timaru AGM and lunch, Local Arts Scheme Subcommittee, Mid-South Island Women's Refuge and Family Safety Services with Mayor Bowen, Standard Tenders and Procurement Committee meeting, People and Performance Committee meeting. I attended the Potpourri at Arafino Marae alongside Councillor Jackson. And also on Friday I attended the Mountain View High School Peer Support Leadership Panel along with Beth, so, which was really enjoyable. So I'd like to move my Chair's report. Could I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Councillor Burt. Confirmation of minutes held on the 15th of November. I'd like to move those as a true and correct record. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Parker. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Okay, reports. So, establishment and membership of subcommittees. So we have two subcommittees we're going to look at today, and that is Youth Initiatives Subcommittee and the Donations and Loans Subcommittee. So I'll start with the first one in our report, which is Youth Initiative Subcommittee. So the membership proposed is the Mayor, Chairperson, which is myself, of Community Services Committee, another councillor, a youth service worker from YMCA South Mid Canterbury, and with the subcommittee having the authority to select and appoint 2 youth representatives. I just want to acknowledge and record that I am the chair of YMCA Mid and South Canterbury. I have discussed my conflict of interest with Nigel and Bede, and we will be able to manage that. I feel we will manage that conflict well. So I just wanted to note that and record that. So is there anyone in particular that would love to join the Youth Initiative Subcommittee? What?
I said I don't wish to join, but could I suggest that we have a councillor from either the Temuka Pleasant Point ward or the Geraldine ward, so that the youth of Geraldine, Temuka and Pleasant Point are also represented on that committee. And if it is not one of those councillors, that when you appoint the youth representatives, that you ensure that you have one person from one of those areas.
Yes, sure. So I'll open up the floor to Councillor Oliver or Councillor Shannon, because you've already said you don't want to join. Paper, scissors, Well, can I open it up to the floor? Is there anyone else that would like to join the committee? And I note, Councillor Pai, the addition to a Pleasant Point or a rural community members in our youth side. So if I'd like to open it up to the floor. Yes, thank you, Councillor Shannon. Right, do I have to move that? Yes, recommendation. Oh no, no, I don't need to, do I? Do I need to appoint him, move it and second it? I suppose I can.
I think you should move that Councillor Shannon.
Okay, so I move that Councillor Shannon joins the A team. Oh. Okay, and seconded by Councillor Oliver. Thank you very much. Okay, Donations and Loans Subcommittee. So the membership proposes chairperson of the Community Services, the Mayor, 3 councillors, of which one councillor is to represent the rural wards. So I just note that this is only 2 meetings a year, twice annually. Can I have 3 people, please? Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Councillor Oliver, if he's keen. He did a great job chairing as well last year. They are big meetings, but they're really enjoyable for those that haven't served on this committee as well. Are you interested? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor
And Councillor Piddington. And one more. Well, I've got the floor. Who else wants to?
Councillor Booth, thank you. I appreciate that support.
I'm happy to move all those 3. Thank you.
Great, so thank you. So I move that Councillor Oliver, Councillor Piddington and Councillor Booth will join the Donations and Loan Subcommittee. Yes, okay, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Pye. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Okay, urgent business items. I don't believe there is any.
Sorry, just a point. Have you technically covered the item 2, approves the delegations and memberships?
No. Okay, so approves the delegations and memberships for each of the subcommittees as set out below. Could you add that, please, Jess, to the recommendation? So I moved it. Councillor Pye, you continue to second it. Thank you. Okay, urgent business items. There is none minor nature matters. Okay, so I need to move us into exclusion of the public. Thank you, Councillor Parker. And the reasons is obviously to approve the minutes.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everyone to Mission Strategy meeting, and I'll start the proceedings off with apologies. We have Raymond Hassel, Ali Talbot and Jan Finlayson. Someone like to move those? Thank you, Councillor Oliver and Your Worship Mayor. All those in favour? Against, so moved. I have no information in relation to urgent business or a minor nature. Is that correct? Okay, moving along, conflicts of interest. Do we have any conflict of interest in respect to any of the papers today? Got this Gold Chairman's report. As of our last meeting, I've attended People in Performance, the Citizenship and Council meeting. Following that, meetings on policy submissions, the Audit and Risk Committee, and various touch points throughout the councillors, new councillors' inductions. I'd like to move that as my Chairman's report. Have a second, Councillor Jackson. Thank you. All those in favour? Against, so carried. So moving ahead to item 6 on page 6.1, the minutes of the Environmental Services meeting held on the 15th of November 2022, and so moved by Councillor Parker and seconded by Councillor Shannon. Any discussion in respect to those? All those in favour? Against? So moved. Going to reports, items 7 and 7.1. So we have our in-house carbon management, carbon inventory.
Sorry, you're on the environmental services.
Oh, sorry. Jeepers. Shall I go back to? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's slightly embarrassing. 7.1, establishing membership of subcommittees. Sorry. I always like to run other people's meetings. So on this one, we have establishing 2 subcommittee and reference groups, and one's in relation to rates subcommittee submissions and the Theatre Royal and Heritage Facility reference group. So I'll open the floor to Jason to talk to those.
Thank you. So the first committee or subcommittee that we are establishing today is the Rates Remission Subcommittee. This is one that's been around for every council triennium. So on this one, this is around where decision making on rates remissions appeals, where the application is declined or partially remitted. So that's when this committee meets. We're proposing the membership of the Mayor, the Chairperson of the Commission Strategy, Chairperson of the Community Services Committee with the quorum of 2, and it's really just to hear any appeals on those matters.
Any discussion from council?
That's
yeah,
fine.
Only that I don't think we met last
No.
term, so
Yeah.
yeah, not very onerous.
Yeah, so it's in respect to delegations anyway.
No, and the second subcommittee, this follows the Theatre Royal and Heritage Facility decision that was made prior to Christmas, and there was a discussion around having a governance reference group. At that meeting, it was agreed that the Mayor, Chairperson, Community Services Committee, and 2 councillors, who at that time were nominated as Councillor Piddington and Councillor Jackson. So this is a report back in terms of establishing the subcommittee and talking about the functions, which are relatively wide for that meeting. So happy to take any questions on that. Yes.
So in terms of, if there is any discussion, I suppose it's around the terms of reference for that group, but it's a moving feast. Are we happy? Is there any discussion in relation to that? Happy to move, Your Worship. Seconder, Councillor Pye. All those in favour? Against, so carried. And moving to 7.2, financial report for the month ending November 2022. And again, I'd like to welcome to the bench here to open the floor for you to give us a talk to this paper and open to any questions.
Thank you. So I'll just kick off. So Andrea Rankin, Acting CFO. So this is the report back on the November 22 financial results in order for Council to have awareness of where our financial position is at. And Andrea will go through some of the detail. I think it's really important to note that there are some timing differences within this report, and that The finance team over the last couple of months have been working hard on the forecast, and so the forecast is the most important thing in terms of where we're going to be at the end of the financial year. So this shows where we are at the end of November. The report that we're bringing to the 14th of February council meeting as part of the 6-monthly report will include the forecasted position as at the end of December and where we're going to be at the end of June. So with that in mind, I'll just hand over to Andrea to highlight any significant matters.
Thank you. Part of what I was going to say was talking about the forecast, but you've covered that. So I guess just looking at November, we were in a surplus at that point in time, with operating revenue continuing to be above budget. And some of that above budget stuff relates to unbudgeted water revenues that we've received through the stimulus and the Three Waters transition support. From an expense perspective, we're tracking along consistently with budget, so that's good. And then I guess from a capital expenditure perspective, we are running below budget with the intention to catch up but not fully spend all capital this year, as the forecast next month will show. And the debt to revenue ratio has remained the same. We've taken on no debt in the November period.
Excellent. Open to the floor. Any questions? Councillor Piddington.
Thanks for that. Just a couple of things I wondered if you could help me with. Like on page 16, it says roading is $1.4 million over budget, mainly due to sealed road maintenance and emergency works. With those big numbers, I wonder whether we can have them split down at some stage, because I'd like to know how much we spend on emergency work versus just regular sealing. Because while the budget overall is pretty good, there are some big ups and downs. And my second question is page 24, 743 of wages is going to be capitalised. Just wondered, give us an example of when you'd capitalise wages into projects.
Well, I can certainly answer the first question there around the roading side of things. So basically, when it comes to resurfacing, we stick to budget. We're not extending that whatsoever. So the extra expenditure is all been around the emergency work side of things.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Andrew. The way it read, I thought we were doing some sealing and it was, no, that makes sense. So it's quite big unbudgeted work with more to come, no doubt.
Yes, we're still completing some of that work, yeah.
Any idea what the final cost will be? And whether we get any back from...
Not offhand, no, I can find that out for you if you wish.
Oh no, it doesn't matter, I just want...
Andrew, do you want to also have an answer the second question? Yeah. You can, because this is around at the moment we've got a number of operational costs, about 740,000, which we're about to capitalise into capital projects. Do you want to give us some examples to Councillor Piddington where you might capitalise in the Three Waters and roading space?
Yeah, but basically, so we capitalise, I guess, well, where staff work on capital projects, that is a cost to the project as such. So that is where we capitalise the salary component of that. Now, it's done by journal, and usually it's a wash up at the end of the year, so it will show as a variance at this point.
Okay, so that's the annual catch-up kind of thing?
Yeah, that's right. It's a balancing, catch-up. So we want to know how much time staff have actually spent on capital works projects as we move through to that point.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It was just a big number sitting there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I just add, also, Councillor Piddington, in order to keep visibility over the remuneration, at the end of the year, when we do the annual report, there's essentially, on the face of the P&L, the Statement of Financial Performance, there's 4 lines for expenditure. One of them is remuneration. Those numbers will appear in that as well. So it's really an exercise in management accounting about what is the true cost of that capital project, but it doesn't, you will still see the full cost to council of remuneration paid in wages as well. So it's a presentation issue to inform readers about what is the true cost of a project.
No, that's cool. It's just that it was a big number.
Yes, it is.
In 1 month, and I just...
Yes, I appreciate that, but just, it kind of appears almost in 2 parts, if you like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paddington, if you close out your speaker, thank you. Your worship, Mayor.
Thank you. Look, a couple of things I note. One, parks, similar with pools being significantly under budget. Obviously staffing, whether it's staffing sitting with us or staffing sitting with the contractors, are an issue. But the problem that you have when parks is 300k under budget is that actually we've got a massive decline in service delivery, and I think that's probably some of the issues that we're seeing, you know, around town at the moment, and our townships as well, as far as weed growth and those sort of things. So more just highlighting the point that, and we understand that we need a plan for the likes of the pools, and even though we've been, you know, trying to get a plan, you know, what is our plan for our contracting? Is the model, you know, correct at the moment? You know, did we utilise some staffing resource from universities, etc., you know, for some of those, you know, menial type jobs that, you know, pretty much anyone can do on the back of a lawnmower or weed eater, etc. And then we wouldn't be getting complaints that we do. Just want to note also emergency works that I assume officers will bring forward increase in the emergency fund to annual plan, and probably then LTP as well, because we need to focus on that. But my question was around the 172, which is waste minimisation fees. So 302k below budget. I'll just speak so you don't have to go to it, but 172 relates to waste collection bin lease income no longer receivable due to the contract supplier. But if we've changed the contract supplier, we know we've done that. Why is it in the budget? And is that is that effectively a deficit that we haven't taken into account?
Yeah, basically the budget as it stands, the annual plan budget didn't take that into account because there was a new contract that came in place pretty close to when the budget was formed. So that lease component that the contractor used to pay, doesn't under the new contract, was still in the budget at the time. So yeah. Waste fees, yeah, they're down as well because it's probably because less volumes are going in. Now, one of the reasons that I do know of was that Mackenzie delayed the start of their new contract. So hence a lot of the waste was still going to their old landfill arrangements. It didn't come to Timaru, but we had budgeted for them to start on the 1st of July. So there's a bit of a difference there. And commercial waste, of course, is a major driver with our landfill, and it seems that the volumes are down there as well, which, you know, you've got to recognise too that costs are probably going to be a little bit lower at the same time.
So that 172 though, is that a hole? Is that an oversight effectively, or we were aware of that?
It was an oversight at the time the budget was prepared.
So I guess moving forward that'll come out as far as future budgets for it.
It will be corrected for the next annual plan.
Yeah. Okay.
And get an overview here.
Yes, so that'll be corrected as part of the annual plan. What's interesting in the waste space, if we look at page 22, this is the activity view. So when we look at waste minimisation as an activity, the revenue is down sort of 150,000, but the expenses are also down 91,000. So when you net it off, it's about a 61 net difference.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when we're looking at revenue and expenditure in isolation, we need to sort of look at the activity view as well. But waste is an issue which we are addressing as part of the annual plan, along with the emergency works number as well.
Okay, cool. So effectively that waste can be addressed through fees and charges.
Yeah, and so to a point, yes. And so that's why when we do the forecast, which we're doing next month, for the next report, those numbers will tease out where we expect waste to land at the end of the year.
Yeah, because traditionally waste has always been a performer, hasn't it? You know, largely through volume over the weighbridge, but it's nice for it to stay in that part of the business to be a performer. We've got enough underperformers, so thank you.
Well, what I will say is, COVID has changed things a little bit with waste as well, and people are a lot more conscious of it in the commercial sector side of things, and they're looking at different disposal methods, not just sending it to landfill as much anymore.
Sorry, can I just have one?
Yes, go.
Yeah, so in the commentary around offsetting the unfavourable variance with 120k for the levy refund, that's fine in itself, but the 120k levy refund is targeted, isn't it? So targeted to specific projects, is that correct? Oh, so so it's saying it's giving some balance, I guess, by saying, hey, we haven't received income here because we made a mistake, but in offsetting that unfavourable variance is a 120k waste levy refund. So is that? Oh, so that's not specific to. So that's just we've effectively overpaid the levy.
The levy's built into the waste charge here, yeah, and then we get return on that levy. That levy comes back to 50% of it comes back to council. So,
yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah,
excellent. Sorry, Councillor Pye. Councillor Shannon's been waiting, and then I'll go Councillor Pye. Yes. Yeah, so Councillor Shannon. Yeah.
That's right. Mayor Bowen actually did touch on the parks maintenance underspend today, and while we are of course sympathetic to our contractors' personnel challenges, at what point do we have a look at what's not being done and perhaps look at other opportunities to address those, or even have a look at the contract and say this actually isn't being honoured? Do we tolerate it till the end of the financial year, or are we already highlighting areas that we need to take care of this now, because it's not a good look for the council or our whole district?
with the parks maintenance is a real challenge at the moment for us. Basically, the contracts that are in place have been priced very lowly and cheaply, and it is a struggle to keep contractors meeting their targets. But we do have people who are struggling to do that. We are trying to achieve that. Coupled with that, we are actually going through a complete review of the parks and the parks contracts. So we're doing what's the Section 17A review, which is looking at the whole way we deliver the service and how we can do it better. And the contract makeup is brought into that. One of the issues we do have with parks is there's 19 different contracts, which is a significant number, and a significant number for staff to manage as well. So we will be rationalising that to a lesser number of contracts. Yeah. But there is the whole review is being undertaken at the moment.
And when is that going to be complete? I mean, are we going to see out the financial year until that review's been finished? And if there are, 19 contracts, are there separate contractors that could meanwhile be picking up some of the contracts that aren't being actually completed to an agreeable standard right now?
Contractors are struggling as well getting staff resources, and we only have really 2 contractors that are operating in Timaru, and they hold most of those contracts.
Sorry, just a supplementary. The hierarchy of usurping is the mayor.
No, thank you. Look, I mean, the comment around, contractors and they've still signed up to a contract. That's the point that I get. It doesn't matter, you can't just come to council and say, well, actually, we didn't price it right. They still have to deliver. And I think we need to hold them to that no matter what. And it's not okay that their level of service that we've committed to, at the point in time, I know no one can preempt inflation and all those sorts of things, but actually we have to hold them to what they promised to deliver. And if they can't deliver, then we need to look at our options. That's where I sit.
What I will say is we are penalising those contractors for non-delivery every month. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Pye, in relation to waste. Hold on. Hold that thought. Anyone else? Okay.
I just, want to go back to the waste. So in the last report, we had 2 major variances that effectively offset each other. So one was we were way over budget on the contractor collection costs of about 519,000. And so my question is that still a variance? And there was also a positive variance in the carbon credits of 614,000, and it said that was timing and they weren't bought in December. So my question is, did we buy those credits and has the curbing contractor come into line, the expenses, or have we not bought the credits and they're still both big variances, they just happen to net each other off and so are not apparent in the report? Thank you.
We have bought the carbon credits, yes.
Yeah.
And in relation,
Sorry, so does that mean that we've come back into line more on the budget for the curbside collection? Because that was quite a variance last time, but that it obviously must have come back into line as well.
I would have to.
Okay, thank you.
I think we need to check that, but I think reading the numbers, it hasn't spat out, so I think it may have come back in line, but we'll confirm that. And that's what so we're forecasting the whole of waste to see where those issues are so that we can properly understand them and where possible put plans in place to address them, or if not, at least we understand where they sit.
Further question?
I'd just like to point out that we haven't purchased all of our carbon credits yet. We've purchased a substantial number of them, but I think we've got about another 10,000 to get.
Thank you. I just have, just for my understanding, could you just explain to me, under the personnel costs, you talk about a vacancy factor, and it offsets one of the variances. I just don't understand what that means.
So what we do, we budget all staff at 100%, and so that's the expectation that those are the roles. But then we understand that we have an 8 to 10% vacancy factor during the year, so we then take that factor off. And so whilst we budget staff, we then go, actually they're not going to be here, so we take that off. So the vacancy factor at the moment is running much higher because we have quite a high level of vacancy at the moment, and that's why I guess personnel as a whole is slightly under, given the staffing issues at Sea Bay, vacancies throughout the organisation, and yeah, so that's what that is.
Councillor Scott.
I just wanted to talk about the subsidies and grants section around the Theatre Royal, and the reference to the MB grant. So I couldn't see how much we have drawn down to date. So could I understand how much has actually been drawn down to date? I see we haven't drawn down the $1 million due to stage, but how much have we actually drawn down in total to date?
I'll get Nicole to assist with this, but the issue with this is that it's a timing difference. So we know we're going to get X $1 million from MB during the year. It's just going to come at certain stages, and because this is just a phased budget at this point in time, that's why the variance is splitting out. So MB have now reconfirmed that they will be giving us the full 11.6 million for this project. As part of our forecasting, we just need to phase it correctly. But I'll get Nicole just to answer how much have we received and when the next track
because we've got 11.3, so I just wondered how much we've drawn down to date, because I sort of missed that in my knowledge gathering.
I think we'll get the numbers in full, Nicole, because I think actually there's a drawdown to date for this financial year and a total since we've had the MB money. So there's going to be two parts that will make it up. So we'll go back into prior years and get what was to 30 June 2022 and what we've had from 1 July to the current point in time.
It'd just be good to know that heading into our reference group meeting, so I just have a better feel for the financial side of that. So thank you.
So that reference meeting is tomorrow, isn't it? Yes, so they'd be capable of being... You're right.
I'd have thought we would. Yeah, I think we can do that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Magic.
yeah.
Awesome. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Booth.
Just the variance with the capitalisation of the funds. So when you capitalise, these are the year-to-date figures. Is that correct? So when you capitalise 700 and whatever it is, $1,000, that would therefore come off the wages personnel costs. Is that right?
As Bede was talking to before, it still comes off personnel. It's a difference between funding, so it's funded through capital. So we'll transfer that to capital, the capital spend will go up, but at the end of the year it still appears in our financial statements as salaries and wages.
So that 700,000 has been spent on wages, so therefore you're showing you're 700,000 below. So
currently capital is showing a 700,000 below what it should. Yes, and it'll get transferred.
Yeah, but the wages, so it goes against so you take that figure off the ledger, the wages or the personnel ledger.
It stays in personnel, it's just funded through capital.
Okay. Don't really understand, but...
wages, when we pay wages, there's an entry which goes and says wages have been paid of 100, so the bank account drops by 100. But we then, if 75 of those wages are to capital, we show 75 of those wages going against a capital project, and it increases the value of that capital project by 75. The wages paid across the organisation remains at 100. It's just where the funding for it is allocated.
Happy with that, Councillor Luke? Any other questions? Okay, can I have a mover in relation to receiving that report? Thank you, Councillor Scott. And Your Worship the Mayor, all those in favour? Aye. Against? So carried. I have no further business of urgent business or minor nature business, so I will close the meeting at 12:48. Thank you.